Hey, remember when Sony promised to release classic PlayStation games on their online service and then they just kind of ignored it for a bunch of months in a row? Well, good news everybody, the OG PlayStation games are back on PS Plus. That's right, today's subscribers will have access to 3 old-school PS1 games, including Grandia, Moto, and Klonoa, Door to Phantomile. These are 3 popular games, but are any of them actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Next Generation, PSM, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when these games first came out. So go and fuel up your hover bike and get ready to slay a dragon, because this is a very eclectic episode of PlayStation Plus Review Crew.
So anyway, I'm playing Moto, right? And I'm riding on this jet motorcycle, and I'm hurtling through different terrain: snow, concrete, ocean, jungle. I mean, when you got that kind of power between your legs, you don't know what to expect. Anything could happen.
After the early success of PlayStation racing games like Ridge Racer and Wipeout, Sony wanted to ensure that their 32-bit system was where speed demons went to get their fix. One of the new racing games readied for the PlayStation's second wave in 1996 was Moto, a game that mixed motorcycles and hovercrafts that was developed by the same people that gave us Twisted Metal. This allowed developers single-track the opportunity to create new and unique tracks that could be anything from a swamp level to an icy road on a snowy mountain range. And because we're dealing with hover bikes, we're given a cool grapple ability that really makes the game feel different from every other racing game on the market. All of this sounds great on paper, but were the critics impressed? Well, the answer to that question may depend entirely on which magazine you subscribed to back in the day. Electronic Gaming Monthly, for example, loved the game, giving it an average score of 9.25 out of 10. Joe couldn't stop raving. I love this game. The developers at Single Track have come away with another winner. The tracks are long and interesting, with a number of challenging obstacles like trees, stumps, and even a waterfall. The well-designed tracks make this one of the best racing games around. Todd agreed, giving it a 9 out of 10 and calling it the PlayStation's Wave Race. The 10 tracks are very challenging as well as exciting. When your water cycle drops 200 feet, your stomach goes along with it. The physics in this game are incredible, and this game is full of gut-wrenching action. The 2-player mode is also a nice touch. The sound and visual effects of the mud and water squirting off the back of your water cycle are incredible. It's a solid, well-designed game. Now, while EGM may have fallen in love with Moto, the same could not be said for other magazines. Computer and Video Games ended up going as low as a 2 out of 5 in issue 185. That isn't too far off from GamePro, believe it or not, who gave it a 2.5 out of 5. These bikes handle like they're mired in molasses. It's tough to get a feel for the floaty handling on turns and jumps. Moto's race dynamics, particularly how skilled the AI is and how poorly your bike responds to collisions and catching air, are so unfair and unrealistic that you'll stomp your controller to pieces. Steer clear. For the most part, the rest of the critics landed somewhere between these two extremes. Game Fan liked the game enough to give it an average score of 87%. Ultra Game players agreed, giving the game a solid 8.4 out of 10. And then there's the notoriously grumpy Next Generation, who gave it a 4 out of 5 and argued that despite the odd control and graphic characteristics, Moto remains a lot of fun. With intense, challenging races featuring 20 competitors on 10 unique tracks, it never fails to be compelling. Moto can perhaps be best described as a game in which the whole equals more than the sum of its parts. You know what? That's actually a perfect way to describe this creative racing game. Yeah, it takes a little getting used to, but I'm firmly on the pro side of this argument, and I wouldn't mind seeing Moto make a comeback on the PlayStation 5. Make it happen, Sony! After Nintendo, Sega, and well, pretty much every other 16-bit developer trotted out their own mascot platformers, many wondered if the genre had been run into the ground. If this type of game was going to exist in the ever-changing 32-bit ecosystem, then companies knew that they were going to need to come up with something bigger, better, and most importantly, deeper than what we got on the Genesis and Super Nintendo. This is how Namco approached Klonoa Door to Phantomile, a breathtaking adventure with imaginative worlds and deep gameplay that takes a little practice to master. Sadly, the cute and cuddly Klonoa couldn't gain much traction in America, as many Western gamers were looking for darker, grittier titles that pushed the boundaries. But the real question still remains: what did the critics think at the time? Once again, it comes down to which magazine you trusted in 1998. For example, if you subscribe to Computer and Video Games, you might not think that Klonoa was a big deal. Giving it a 3 out of 5, CVG concludes that rather than just being an exercise in platforming skills, Klonoa's clever level designs give it a satisfying puzzle element. Part of the fun is the quality of characters, the way they behave, as well as the way they look. They're all cute in a Japanese way, and I like the way you have to use the different enemies to make progress. I even like the way all the characters speak in weird squeaks. Klonoa's look and low difficulty make it perfect for younger players, but more experienced gamers should also find it satisfying and fun to play. Now, on the other hand, there were a number of magazines that absolutely fell in love with the little guy. Hyper was one of them, giving the game a 91%. You also saw Game Fan, who went just a little higher, giving it a 93%. Nightmare loved the game, explaining it like this: old school 2D mechanics augmented with crisp, beautiful 3D graphics and some magical tunes made Klonoa a delightful platformer that is guaranteed to put a smile on even the most jaded gamer's face. It's not particularly long nor particularly tough, but the experience is such an enjoyable one that you're not liable to care. Glitch agreed. I mean, just look at him. Stare at all that ludicrous CG. Swim in those happy tunes. Klonoa's presentation is incredible. 60 frames per second looks awesome in a side-scroller. Mad AV aside, the gameplay is also very close to perfection. The grabbing play mechanic is cool. I think it's been incorporated into the gameplay well, and the control is tight. You see, just like Knights, Klonoa's gameplay is accepted as being near perfect. And after you come to that realization, the only thing left is complete immersion. It's probably worth noting that Edge was not nearly as impressed with Klonoa as the rest of the critics, giving it a 7 out of 10. Game Informer liked it a bit more than that, giving it a score of 8 out of 10. And then there's PSM, who went as high as a 4.5 out of 5 in their 7th issue. Klonoa is top-notch production throughout, exemplifying everything we've come to know and love about the platforming genre. And while the game may not shatter the platformer mold, it offers enough in the way of brilliant design and superb gameplay that you could care less. For fans of the genre, Klonoa is a must-have game in the truest sense. Here's hoping that Namco's first steps into uncharted territory are only an indication of things to come. Even if a couple of critics weren't as enthusiastic in their praise, there's just no doubt that Klonoa is a superb platformer that fans of the genre will love. If you've somehow never had a chance to check out this brilliant series, definitely do it now.
PlayStation.
When it was first released in 1997 on the Sega Saturn, many doubted that American gamers would ever have a chance to get their hands on GameArt's brilliant role-playing game, Grandia. However, all that changed with the worldwide success of Final Fantasy VII, a seismic shift that convinced formerly reluctant developers to ride the role-playing tsunami hitting the West. Grandia is one of the games that took advantage of people's sudden interest in RPGs, giving gamers an epic adventure with a fun story, great characters, and tons of bosses to fight. Best of all, it was easy to jump in and accessible to all, making it the perfect choice for American gamers who were only now warming up to the genre. These days, Grandia is considered a true 32-bit masterpiece, but what did the critics say back in 1999? Unlike the previous two games that we've talked about today, Grandia received unanimous praise from all the critics. More than anything else, it actually felt like a win for gamers. I mean, when you read Electronic Gaming Monthly's reviews, you can tell that they held the game in high esteem, so the idea of it finally coming to America was a big deal. Just ask Crispin, who started his review this way. A legendary Saturn RPG, Grandia had a lot to live up to when I sat down to play it. This thing did not let me down. Sure, the characters are too cutesy for my taste, the voice acting is lame, and the music is so-so. But the epic story and, still better, awesome dungeons make up for the shortcomings. At least you'll finally see what all the fuss was about. Shu agreed, though decided to stick his toe in the system wars for his review. While it's unfortunate that the US Saturn didn't grab bragging rights for this title, I'm happy Grandia is out here at all. The game is sweet. It has great graphics, an epic storyline, tons of characters to interact with, and a kick-ass combat system that won't have you dreading the next repetitive RPG battle. Don't accidentally miss out on one of the best RPGs of the year just because it doesn't have the Final Fantasy VIII level of hype surrounding it. Electronic Gaming Monthly ended up giving the game an average score of 9 out of 10. Now that's perfectly in line with the 4.5 out of 5 Grandia got from GamePro, as well as the 4.5 out of 5 that the official US PlayStation magazine gave it. It also lines up with the 90% average you saw over at GameFan. As one of the few magazines to actually review both the PlayStation and the Saturn versions, GameFan ended up having a unique perspective. Ego explains that GameArt's baby enters an already ugly RPG war on the PlayStation, but it's still one of the best in its class and should do well. Unfortunately, the Saturn rev didn't suffer from as much slowdown as this, and the English voices are, unprofessional. But don't let these blemishes dissuade you from purchasing this title, which is better than Final Fantasy VIII. Fury also liked it, but couldn't stop name-dropping other RPGs. I must admit that I love nearly all things Saturn-related. Though Panzer Saga is my RPG of choice, Grandia had an excellent story and adorable characters. Though the PlayStation version is identical to its Saturn counterpart, it sadly might fall victim to the fact that there are just too many RPGs headed to the PlayStation. While I would recommend this title over Jade Cocoon, it has some hefty competition with the likes of Final Fantasy VIII and Thousand Arms. Now, when it comes to the outliers, you pretty much have Game Informer, who gave Grandia an average score of 7.25 out of 10. Next Generation was also a little lower than the rest of the pack, though with a 4 out of 5, it wasn't by too much. There's a hitch to the game's battle engine similar to Final Fantasy VIII's Guardian Force. You must use the individual spells for them to increase levels, meaning that you're gonna have to fight a lot just to make the magic worth using. Add to this some questionable voice acting, and Grandia just misses the 5-star rating. But with its strong character and engrossing storyline, you won't mind a bit. Look, this is, without a doubt, one of those classic role-playing games that genre fans absolutely need to play. Sure, there's a HD version out there that pretties things up a bit, but if you haven't played Grandia and have the PlayStation Plus, then this really is a good time to see what all the hype is about. It's a real gem.
12月18日グランディア12月18日グランディア12月18日
冒険はもう始まっているグランディア予約受付中セガサターン
Hey, thanks for watching us break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes just like this one every time Sony adds classic PlayStation games to their online service. We have a whole playlist with dozens of episodes just like this one, so give it a binge. Now, here's the question I have for you. Which of these 3 games is in most need of a sequel or a reboot? All three of them received multiple sequels and then just kind of faded away. And honestly, I'd like to see any of them make a comeback, but I'm really rooting for Jet Moto. We just don't have enough racing games like that anymore. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back later this week with a review of Flashback 2. Plus, look for a new episode of the Nintendo Switch Online Review Crew. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,